Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I always thought the past had weight like a stone in your pocket. Heavy, yes, but solid. Something you could set down if you grew tired of carrying it. But that night, January 14th, 2019, 11:32 p.m., Albany, New York, during a storm that turned the city into a frozen tomb, I realized the past isn't solid at all. It's liquid, it seeps. You can't hold it, you can't stop it. It flows into cracks you don't even know are there until you feel it chilling you from the inside out. That was the night the email came. I was the last one in the office on Sheridan Avenue, the 6th floor of McGrath and Doyle LLP, where the lights hummed like they were tired of themselves. My screen glowed in the dark, the cursor blinking on the last line of a brief. My fingers ached stiff from hours of typing, and I was halfway through shutting it all down when the notification pulsed at the corner of the screen, from Eli Harper. Subject: still waiting at the altar. I stopped breathing. It had been 6 months since Eli's accident on the Northway. 6 months since the funeral, since his mother's face collapsing into her hands, since the obituary in the Times-Union I read 3 separate times just to prove it true. Dead men don't send emails. But there it was, his name, my ex-fiancé, the man I'd once promised forever to. My thumb trembled as I clicked. The body of the message was blank. Just an expanse of white, like a page waiting to be filled or a door waiting to be opened. I whispered to the empty room, "No. This is sick." The heating vent rattled. The lights hummed. My reflection in the black computer screen looked stretched, pale as though I'd already started to unravel. I shut down the monitor too quickly, the pop of it going dark like a gunshot. The storm pressed against the windows, branches scraping glass like nails. I told myself it was a hack, some cruel prank, or maybe a bot that scraped obituaries and spat out taunts. But the subject line cut through every excuse. Still waiting at the altar. Those were his words. He'd whispered them to me on our wedding day that never happened, when I was too pale in my dress and couldn't stop shaking. When he leaned close and asked, half joking, "You're not a flight risk, are you? Still waiting at the altar?" And I'd laughed then, nervous but relieved he'd said it. But the truth was I had been a flight risk. Long before I caught him cheating, I'd imagined walking away. I'd imagined disappearing. I grabbed my bag and bolted from the office. Outside, the storm was feral. Albany looked abandoned, entombed in ice. My car was a frozen sculpture at the curb. I hacked at it with my scraper, breath pluming, fingers numb. That's when I saw them. Boot prints in the untouched snow leading straight to my driver's door. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned over to trace them with my eyes. The trail led from the street, clear, sharp edges pressed into the powder. But halfway across they stopped. No return prints, no shuffle, just gone, as if whoever made them had stepped off the earth. The storm howled through empty streets as I slammed into the car, shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. I didn't breathe again until I reached Lark Street, where the yellow streetlights glowed dim through the curtain of ice. The next morning, I tried to smother the memory under routine, coffee, files, tasks, emails that didn't come from ghosts. Danielle leaned against my office door by mid-morning, chewing her straw like it was gum. "You look like hell, Maya." "Thanks." Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't sleep?" I hesitated. My throat felt thick with secrets. She'd known me since college, since before Eli, before the ring, before everything crumbled. She was also the one who'd told me, blunt as a knife, that catching Eli in bed with someone else was the best thing that ever happened to me. "Storm kept me up," I said, finally. Her gaze softened. "You dodged a bullet with that one, you know. You should stop looking like you're waiting for the bullet to come back around." I forced a smile. But the thing about bullets, they don't vanish. Sometimes they ricochet. The call started 2 nights later. 17 a.m. every night. The phone would buzz me awake, and on the other end, silence. Not just silence, but a silence that felt occupied. The faint sound of breathing, uneven, as if someone were holding the phone too close. And sometimes faint and distant church bells tolling. I unplugged the phone. I shoved it into a drawer. But the ringing found me anyway. echoing in my dreams, dragging me awake with my heart in my throat. Then came the objects. The first was the wedding shoes. I found them on the kitchen table one morning. They were supposed to be boxed in the back of my closet, hidden like bones. But there they sat, soaked with melting snow, dripping onto the wood. I staggered back, my breath jagged. My hands shook as I reached for them. That's when I saw it. Tucked inside the left shoe, a scrap of paper. The ink was smudged, but the words were clear enough. "Remember our first date?" My stomach lurched. That night, years ago, we'd sat in a diner on Western Avenue. Greasy fries between us. I'd teased him for ordering coffee at 10 p.m. He'd teased me for never finishing my fries. It was stupid, sweet, ordinary, and the note wasn't mine. I hadn't written it. But the words were something Eli had whispered to me more than once, smiling as if that cheap diner was sacred ground. I dropped the shoes. They hit the table with a wet slap, snow pooling like blood. "You're sleepwalking. You're losing it," I whispered, but I knew I wasn't. The ring came next. At first, it was on the nightstand, the gold band I'd pressed into Eli's hand the day I ended things. Then the next morning, it was on my pinky, too loose. The morning after that, it was on my index finger. Then my thumb, every day a different finger. Every day, closer to the one it belonged on. I tried to throw it away, down the garbage chute, into the Hudson. But every morning it was back. Once I woke to find it choking my left hand, swollen over the knuckle of the very finger I'd once promised him with. My skin was red, bruised. It took soap and ice to pry it off. I drove to Colony on a Saturday, snow crunching under my boots as I stood on the Harper's porch. Eli's mother opened the door, her face collapsed in on itself. "Maya," she said softly as though she were the ghost. I need to know," I stammered. "When he died, was he wearing his ring?" Her hands twisted in her cardigan. "No, the paramedics told us. He wasn't, but he never took it off. We thought maybe. You had it, I had. I'd given it back the day I broke us. The day I told him no one could love me enough to stay. But now it was with me every morning, crawling finger by finger toward its rightful place." The blackout came the following week. One moment, the city hummed with heaters and traffic. The next, silence. My apartment on the 6th floor drowned in darkness, the storm outside pressing against the glass. That was when I heard it. A whisper from the stairwell. My name, Maya. I pressed my ear to the door. The air on the other side was thick with footsteps, deliberate, climbing upward. And under it all, faint and hollow, the toll of bells. Panic surged. I yanked my coat, bolted into the stairwell, racing down. The air reeked of iron and wet stone, every step booming like a drum. Behind me, the footsteps quickened. I reached the bottom and slammed into the exit door. But it didn't budge. My palm slapped cold steel. It was locked. From the outside, the footsteps stopped just behind me, close enough I could feel the air shift. And then his voice, low, steady, exactly as I remembered, spoke in the dark. "Where are you going, Maya?" "You said forever." My scream tore out of me, raw and small, swallowed by the dark stairwell. I don't remember climbing back up the stairs. I don't remember fumbling through my door with hands that felt frozen, or curling on the kitchen floor with my coat still on. The blackout stretched on for hours, and I sat in the dark, shaking, waiting for footsteps that never came. When the lights finally stuttered back to life, the clock said 4:03 a.m., and the ring gleamed on the counter beside me as if it had been there the whole time. I should have moved out that night. I should have called someone, anyone. But shame is its own kind of lock. Who would believe me? That my dead ex-fiancé was sending emails, moving shoes, slipping rings on my fingers? I could barely believe it myself. The worst part was the voice. I knew what I'd heard. That low, steady tone. The exact cadence Eli had used the night he proposed. His words echoed relentless. "Where are you going, Maya?" "You said forever." Danielle came by the next evening with Chinese takeout, shaking snow off her boots. "You've been dodging my calls. You look like hell." I tried to smile. "You've said that 3 times this week." "That's because you do," she said, plopping cartons on the table. The steam rose, sweet and salty. "What's going on?" The words tangled in my throat. If I told her, she'd think I was unraveling. Maybe I was. But the silence between us stretched thin, and finally I broke. "I've been seeing things. Hearing things," her brow furrowed. "What kind of things?" My voice dropped. "Eli, She froze, chopsticks hovering. Maya, don't, he's gone. I got an email from him. At work. Then calls every night at the same time. And I swallowed hard. The shoes, the ring. They keep showing up. Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not disbelief, fear. Show me, she said finally. I led her into the bedroom. The shoes were on the dresser where I'd left them, stiff with dried salt. She bent close, studying the scrap of paper inside. This looks recent. I didn't write it, she didn't argue. She just stood there too long, lips pressed tight before stepping back. You need sleep. You're working yourself to death. That's what this is, but that night she stayed over. We curled on the couch with old movies, her presence a buffer against the silence. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe I'd sleep. At 3:17 a.m., the phone rang. Danielle shot up, eyes wide. Don't answer it. We both stared at the handset vibrating on the counter. It buzzed, stopped, buzzed again. Finally, it went still. I exhaled. But then her phone lit up on the coffee table, a text. Unknown number. Danielle's hand shook as she picked it up. Her face drained of color. I leaned over her shoulder. The message was simple. Why is she with you? She's mine. From that night on, Danielle changed. She tried to hide it, but I saw the fear hollowing her. She jumped at shadows. She stopped inviting me to her apartment. Every time we met, she glanced at her phone as though expecting another message. One night, she admitted, voice trembling. I saw him. Outside my window. Just standing there. Same coat, same smile. He didn't move. My stomach turned to ice. You believe me now? She nodded, but her eyes brimmed with tears. I wish I didn't. After that, she stopped answering my calls. Then she stopped showing up at work. Her desk emptied. When I finally cornered her outside a cafe on Madison Avenue, she wouldn't even look at me. I can't. Maya, I can't have this thing follow me anymore. Her voice cracked and she walked away, leaving me on the sidewalk with snow soaking through my shoes. That was the moment I understood. Whatever Eli had become, he wasn't just mine anymore. He was contagious. The ring kept moving. Every morning, a different finger. I woke one day to find it welded tight on my left ring finger, skin swollen purple around it. My breath hitched, panic clawing up my throat. I yanked, twisted, sobbing as pain seared through me. Finally, with soap and ice, it came free, leaving my skin raw, marked. I hurled it across the room. It clattered against the wall, spun, and came to rest under the bed. I left it there, but the next morning it was back on my finger. I began taping my hands at night, wrapping them like wounds. It didn't matter. The ring always found a way. The blackout returned 2 weeks later. This time I was ready. I'd left candles scattered, flashlights within reach. But none of it mattered when the lights died and the stairwell groaned with footsteps. I pressed against the door, heart battering my ribs. Maya. The voice slid under the crack like smoke. Low, steady, familiar. You left me. You laughed when I said forever. But forever doesn't break, Maya. Forever bends until it fits. The air grew sharp with cold. Frost crept across the doorframe, blooming white under my fingertips. I stumbled back, whispering to myself, He's dead. He's dead, but the lock clicked slowly, deliberately. I ran down the stairs, each step booming. My flashlight swung wild, throwing frantic shadows. At the bottom, the exit door loomed. I slammed into it, locked, again. Behind me, the footsteps stopped. My breath came in ragged sobs. Where are you going, Maya? The voice whispered closer now, right at my ear. You said forever. I pounded on the steel door until my fists went numb. But no one came. Then the lights flickered back, harsh and sudden, and I was alone. The door swung open easily under my palm. Outside, the storm howled. Weeks passed in fragments. Sleep became impossible. Food tasted of ash. My reflection grew hollow-eyed, skin pulled tight. At work, whispers followed me. Co-workers noticing the frost prints on my chair before I arrived. The way I flinched at every phone ring. The isolation grew. Danielle was gone. My brother stopped returning my calls after I snapped at him for suggesting therapy. My apartment felt smaller each day, walls bending inward, and always in the mirrors the shape of him. At first just a flicker at the edge, then clearer. A man in a navy suit, patient, smiling. Sometimes his hand brushed mine in the glass, though the room was empty. Sometimes he mouthed words I couldn't hear. One night I gathered every mirror, every reflective surface, bathroom, hallway, closet doors, and covered them with sheets. But the next morning they were uncovered, and the ring was on my hand again. The breaking point came in late February. I was brushing my teeth leaning over the sink when I looked up and froze. In the mirror, Eli stood behind me. Not pale, not ghostly, whole, alive. His suit crisp, his hair combed as though he were waiting for vows. His hand rested on my shoulder in the reflection, though my skin was bare. His smile widened, perfect, patient. And then, slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head until his smile matched mine. A mirror image, twisted, malevolent. The toothbrush clattered from my hand. I stumbled back, whispering, "No, no, no." The reflection didn't move. His hand stayed on my shoulder. His eyes stayed locked on mine, and then he whispered, not from behind me, not from the room, but from inside the glass, "Forever." My scream broke like glass itself, echoing in the small bathroom, swallowed by the sound of bells tolling faint and endless in the distance. I don't know if I've left the bathroom since. The days blur. Sometimes I eat, sometimes I don't. The mirror shows him always, patient, waiting, his hand brushing mine like a lover's. I've stopped covering the glass. What's the point? Because the question gnaws at me deeper than fear, deeper than logic. Maybe he isn't haunting me. Maybe I never left him. Maybe I laughed at forever, but forever didn't laugh back, and maybe, just maybe, I deserve this. I never thought the quiet hum of fluorescent lights could feel so heavy, like a warning meant only for me. It was the sound of every school hallway at night, buzzing, low, endless, but when I look back now, I swear it wasn't just noise. It was a warning, one I didn't recognize until it was already too late. I used to think of myself as practical, grounded, the kind of girl who could smell a lie before it even left someone's mouth. Not the type to get swept up in something dangerous, or worse, someone dangerous. I wasn't supposed to be one of those girls, but I was wrong. When it came to Ethan Carter, I didn't just fall. I plunged. It was the spring semester of my sophomore year, a season that should have been ordinary. At Briar Glen High, the days carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and cafeteria pizza grease, the chatter of classmates who'd grown up together since kindergarten. Everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least thought they did. And then there was me, the new girl. My family had just moved to town after things I didn't want to talk about. Things from my last school that left me eager to disappear, to keep my head down. My goal was simple. Don't draw attention, don't get attached, just survive unnoticed. I wasn't prepared for Ethan. He wasn't just popular. He was the golden boy. Tall, athletic, but never arrogant about it. Teachers adored him. Moms trusted him. Girls lingered near his locker hoping for a glance. His hazel eyes always seemed lit with a warmth that made people lean closer, as if they could catch some of it for themselves. He was the kind of boy you were supposed to be safe with, and somehow, inexplicably, he noticed me. One day he held the door open after chemistry, flashing that crooked grin. The next he was waiting for me between classes, walking me to lunch, asking about my favorite books like he genuinely cared. And then suddenly, we were holding hands in the hallway like a scene out of a Netflix drama I never thought would star me. My name is Lena Moore, and back then, I thought I was the luckiest girl alive. For the first 2 months, it felt like I was living in someone else's life. One better than mine. Fries shared at Lewis's diner, our knees brushing under the booth. Evenings lying on his backyard grass, whispering about nothing while the stars flickered into view. Stupid little nicknames, promises whispered like secrets. He called me Bright Eyes when I worried too much. I'd trace the freckle beneath his left eye with my thumb. It was soft, mushy, perfect. Even my mom noticed. "He seems too good to be true," she said once, folding laundry with that squint of hers, the one that meant she felt something brewing. I ignored her. I ignored everyone. Because when you're inside something that feels like love, you can mistake storm clouds for fireworks. But then came the changes. At first, subtle. Like when you wake up and feel something's off but can't place it. He stopped walking me home. His text slowed. The warmth in his laugh dulled. His smile felt rehearsed. He changed his lock screen from a picture of us laughing in the diner booth to a blank photo of a forest. I asked him once why. He just shrugged. "I'm over it, that was all." Just 3 words that didn't sound like him. Other things shifted too. He quit student council without explanation. He skipped meetings he once cared about. Teachers still smiled at him, but there was an edge now. Like they noticed too, but chose not to ask. I tried not to panic. Maybe it's just stress, I told my best friend. Jenna, as she popped her gum with sharp little snaps. Senior stuff. College stuff. Family pressure, maybe. Jenna raised her eyebrows. Or maybe he's just losing interest. Blunt, cruel, but honest in that way only best friends can get away with. Still, I held on. Because when you've already fallen too deep, letting go feels worse than staying. The last real conversation before everything cracked open was painfully short. "Hey, Ethan, can we talk?" He checked his watch. "I've got like 10 minutes. Are we okay?" "Yeah, of course." "Why wouldn't we be?" He smiled. His eyes didn't. I didn't believe him, but I told myself I did. It was a Thursday when things shifted for good. We had a half day and most kids bolted. I stayed behind, stringing up fairy lights for the spring dance. I wasn't even in student council anymore. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. Hope he'd show up, that things could go back to what they'd been. Only 2 of us stayed late. Me and Callie James. She was a junior. The kind of girl who slipped through hallways without anyone looking twice. Green streaks in her hair, paint-smudged hoodies, headphones always around her neck, sketchbook always under her arm. We weren't close. But sometimes silence with her felt safer than words with anyone else. As we strung lights across the gym ceiling, I found myself spilling everything. Ethan's distance, the excuses, the ache in my chest, the way something felt wrong though I couldn't name it. Callie listened, didn't interrupt, just tied knots and climbed ladders and let me talk until I felt emptied. Finally, she said something that stuck in me like a splinter. "He's hiding something, but it's not another girl," I blinked. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head, eyes sharp. "Have you ever wondered why no one knows where Ethan lives?" I laughed too loudly. "Of course he has a house," her voice was calm. "Have you been there?" The truth caught me off guard. I hadn't, not once. He always had excuses, parents too strict, house too messy, maybe another time. Whenever I offered to drive him home, he'd ask to be dropped off a block or 2 away. I never questioned it. Until now, Callie didn't push. She just gave me a look. A knowing look. "Be careful, Lena. There's a reason he picked you." Her words followed me like shadows when I left that night. The sky was the color of bruises. The streets near the school gates were nearly empty. And there he was, Ethan, leaning against a lamppost, waiting. "Hey," he said softly. "I was waiting for you." My stomach tightened. I tried to walk past, but he stepped in front. "Let me walk you home." The silence stretched between us. Every footstep felt too loud. Halfway down the block, he asked quietly, "Lena, what's wrong?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "Are you cheating on me?" He froze, his face unreadable. "What?" "Don't lie. Just tell me." For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not anger. Panic. Then came the sound. Rustling. In the trees. "Probably a raccoon," I said, forcing a shaky laugh. But Ethan didn't laugh. He grabbed my hand, urgent, "We need to run." And we did. We tore down side streets, sneakers slapping against pavement. My lungs screamed. We ducked into the old Maple Street playground. Moonlight shimmered off rusted swings off the warped slide. I bent over, gasping. "What the hell is going on?" Ethan's face was pale. His voice tight. "Someone's been following me. For months. They threatened you. Said if I didn't break up with you, they'd kill you." My stomach dropped. "Who?" He hesitated. "Then I think, maybe Callie. From student council." Before I could respond, the playground groaned, metal creaking. Something or someone crawling up the slide. We didn't wait. We ran again. Down Burwood Avenue, lungs tearing, hearts hammering. And then I saw them, a figure sprinting past. I stuck out my foot. They stumbled, crashed to the ground. Ethan pinned them down. I yanked back the hood. Callie, her lips split. Eyes wide, voice ragged. "Lena, you need to run. He's not who you think. He's not cheating. He's a murderer." I froze. Ethan stood smoothly, calm as ever. "She's lying. She's obsessed with me. She's been stalking us for weeks." Callie's eyes locked on mine, pleading. But I was exhausted, confused, terrified. I walked away. The next day, Callie was gone. The office said she'd transferred. No one knew where. Ethan was softer after that. Sweeter. as though a weight had lifted. He even invited me over, finally. His house was strange, too clean, too quiet, no photos, no sound of life. He said his parents were on a trip. In the basement, he showed me a box. "These are the hearts," he said. She sent them. I lifted the lid. They weren't animal hearts. I knew that immediately. They were human. And one had a tiny tattoo etched in the corner. A clover, the same tattoo I'd seen on Callie's wrist. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, Ethan kissed my forehead. "You believe me, right?" I smiled. "Of course." But I was already planning, because the only thing scarier than knowing he was a murderer was knowing I was next. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw him leaning against that rust-stained pillar, smiling like no time had passed. The snow was coming down so hard that night, January 4th, 2019, that the whole city of Duluth felt like it had been erased. Streetlights were smudged halos in the blizzard, cars buried to their mirrors, the air sharp enough to cut lungs raw. I had just finished a double shift at St. Luke's Hospital, 12 hours that stretched into 16. My scrub stiff with the smell of antiseptic and bleach, my skin humming with exhaustion. I should have been thinking about my warm bed, but all I could hear was my mother's voice. No, not her voice exactly, but the silence after it. The unanswered call from that night almost a year ago. I was charting vitals, my phone buzzing in my pocket, and I told myself I'd call her back when the shift ended. But I didn't. By the time I remembered, by the time I got home, she was already gone. A heart attack in her sleep. I never heard her voice again. That's what grief does. It doesn't let you go. It waits in cracks. It comes back in parking ramps and snowstorms, when you least expect it. And that's when I saw him, Evan Hale, leaning against a concrete pillar streaked orange with rust, his arms folded, his head cocked like he'd been waiting all night, his lips bent into that practiced, calm smile, the one that used to feel safe until it didn't. Snow dusted his dark hair, his coat unzipped as though the cold didn't touch him. I told myself to keep walking, to slide my key into my blue Honda and not even look up. But his voice slipped across the space between us, smooth as it ever was, cutting through the howl of the wind. "You still drive the blue Honda, right?" It was such a small thing, a detail anyone could know, but the way he said it, it was the familiarity. The certainty. Like he'd been keeping track, my chest locked tight. I didn't answer. Didn't even let my eyes flick toward him. I forced myself into the car, slammed the locks down, and gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers throbbed. When the headlights lit the ramp, they caught him standing there, still smiling. Before the snow swallowed him, I told myself I imagined it. But a week later, I saw him again, at the Perkins on London Road, where the windows fogged from the heat inside. He sat in a booth alone, stirring a coffee that had gone cold. He didn't wave, didn't speak, just raised his eyes once and met mine before I turned and left. The next day, I spotted him across the street from my apartment, standing in the snow, his hands in his pockets, as though he had nowhere better to be. That's when the gifts started. The first was a scarf, my mother's scarf, the one she wore every winter, red wool threaded with tiny frays, still faintly carrying her perfume even now. I thought I had lost it after she died. Yet there it was, folded neatly on my doormat, a drop of melted snow spreading across the fabric. The second was a ring, her ring. A simple gold band with a tiny stone, nothing flashy, but one she had pressed into my palm the year I turned 20, saying, "So you'll always carry a piece of me." I swore I left it in a jewelry box at my old apartment, but it appeared on my windshield, glittering with ice. The third was a Polaroid. Me sleeping, my hair tangled on the pillow, mouth half open, the sheets pulled up to my chest. The photo was dated 2 weeks earlier. That's when I stopped sleeping. Every creak in the apartment was him. Every hum of the heater was breath in the dark. At work, my exhaustion showed. "You okay, Rach? You look like you've seen a ghost," Mariah asked one night on break. She leaned against the vending machine, sipping Sprite, her eyes sharp with concern. I told her part of it. About Evan, about the scarf, the ring. I didn't mention the Polaroid. I couldn't, that was too much. She laughed, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh you use to cover a shiver. Maybe he never really left. I called the police. They questioned him. He denied everything, said he lived hours away. His alibi checked out. The cops shrugged and suggested I might be tired, stressed, grieving. which was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Then the storm hit. One night after another brutal shift, I trudged out to my car, and my breath froze in my throat. The inside of the windshield was fogged, smudged with condensation, and across the glass, dragged downward in blurred streaks, was a handprint. I locked the doors and tore out of there, wheels spinning on the ice. The storm was a white wall, the road vanishing under me, and I drove blind, praying I didn't slide off into the dark. When I pulled into my lot, my headlights cut through the snow, and there he was, Evan, standing barefoot in the drifts, lips moving silently like whispering a prayer. I bolted inside, slammed the lock, pressed my back against the door. The footsteps outside were slow, deliberate, crunching the snow with weight I could feel in my bones. By morning, the storm had erased every trace. The police found nothing again. I thought about telling Mariah more, but before I could, something happened. She came to me at work, pale, her hands trembling as she held out her phone. On the screen was a text from an unknown number, Sprite always at midnight. Our private joke, something only she and I said during our breaks. 2 days later, a Polaroid appeared on her desk. Both of us sitting in the break room side by side, neither of us looking at the camera. Her voice broke when she asked, "Rachel, how could anyone even?" I didn't know, but in that moment I saw it, the way fear spread, how my life was a contagion, and anyone close to me was at risk. I started pushing people away, skipping breaks with Mariah, answering in half sentences, pretending I didn't notice her concern. Because if he could reach her, then maybe the only way to protect her was to isolate myself completely. I didn't realize isolation was exactly what he wanted. I told myself, isolation was protection, that if I carved out the people around me, he'd have nothing left to target but me. But it didn't feel like a choice, it felt like inevitability. I was already being hollowed out piece by piece. The shifts blurred together after that. Night melted into day, day back into night. I lived in a fog of charting vitals, wiping sweat off fevered brows, inserting IV lines with hands that shook too much for my own liking. I'd catch my reflection in the metal elevator doors at St. Luke's and hardly recognize myself. Sunken eyes, lips chewed raw, a faint tremor in the jaw like I was shivering from the inside. The strange part was how Evan stopped appearing in obvious ways. No more standing outside the apartment. No more booths at Perkins. It was worse now because his absence felt staged, like he knew the uncertainty would erode me faster than his presence. It started with the whispers. I'd be leaning over a patient, or adjusting the monitors when I'd hear something low and close. Rach. Just like my mother used to say, soft, almost tender. The first time I spun so hard I nearly pulled a line out of a patient's arm. No one was there. The hallway was empty except for the faint scuff of rubber soles far down the corridor. The second time, I was in the supply closet, bent over a shelf of saline bags. When I heard "you should have answered," it wasn't Evan's voice. Not entirely. It was hers. My mother's. I stood frozen, plastic crinkling in my fists, the words sinking into me like cold water. That's what grief does. It finds the wound and presses again and again until you don't know where the pain is coming from. That night when I came home, I found the scarf again, folded neatly on my bed. It smelled faintly of lavender, my mother's drawer sachets. But beneath the comfort was something sharp, metallic, almost like blood. I burned it in the sink. Watched the wool curl and blacken, the flames licking higher as if hungry for air. But when the ashes cooled, I swore I could still smell her perfume. Mariah tried to reach me after that. She caught me in the stairwell during a shift, her hands gripping mine so tight her nails dug crescents into my skin. "Rachel, talk to me, please. This isn't just stress. You're not okay." I wanted to tell her everything. About the whispers, about the scarf, about how I wasn't sure anymore if I was being hunted or if I was unraveling from the inside. But then she showed me something that locked my throat, her phone. Another message from an unknown number. "You should take care of her. She looks so tired." And then she pulled out a folded slip of paper from her locker. A Polaroid me, asleep at the break room table, head tipped back, mouth open. And behind me, just at the edge of the frame, a blur. A figure so faint it could have been shadow, but I knew. Mariah's eyes brimmed, her voice breaking. "Rachel, this isn't just you. It's me too. He's doing this to both of us. I couldn't even hug her. All I could think was that my presence was poison. That by staying near her, I was feeding her into his hands. I stopped answering her texts after that. The nights grew heavier. Snow piled against the windows, rattled like fingernails when the wind picked up. I started sleeping in bursts, 20 minutes at a time, sitting upright on the couch with the TV humming static, too afraid to let myself go fully under. But sleep has its own laws. You can't fight it forever. One night I woke to the sound of someone humming. Not a tune exactly, more like a rhythm I knew but couldn't place. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding, and the apartment was dark except for the streetlight glow leaking through the blinds. On the table sat another Polaroid. Me, in that exact moment, eyes shut, head slumped, the blanket sliding off my shoulder. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just sat there staring at it, knowing someone had been in the room not minutes earlier. Maybe still was. I tore the place apart. Closets, under the bed, even the crawlspace hatch in the hallway. Nothing. Not a trace. That's when I stopped trusting the locks. It was around then that I started hearing my mother's voice more often. In the hallways at work. In the parking lot outside. Once in the middle of the night, I woke to someone whispering directly against my ear. "I forgive you." I bolted upright, the sheets damp with sweat, but the room was empty. The words still hung in the air like condensation. I didn't know if it was Evan, mocking me, or something deeper, something older, reaching through the thin veil of exhaustion and grief. The police stopped taking my calls. Even Mariah started pulling back, and I couldn't blame her. She was scared. She was smart enough to want out. The climax came in March. I had finally moved. Again. A new apartment across town, smaller, dimmer. Walls that smelled faintly of mildew. I told myself this was a clean start, even as I taped blankets over the windows and shoved a chair under the doorknob at night. 2 nights into unpacking, I crouched under the sink to store cleaning supplies. My hand brushed something stiff tucked behind the pipes, a Polaroid. I already knew what it would be before I looked. Me, asleep. The same angle, the same fragile tilt of my head toward the window. My mouth slightly open, but this time my eyes were not closed. They were half open, staring directly at the camera. My hand shook so badly the photo nearly slipped into the drain. My breath came in shallow bursts, and for the first time, I couldn't tell if I had been asleep at all when it was taken. Had I opened my eyes and seen him? Had I been awake but paralyzed, unable to move as he leaned over me? Or worse, had something else opened my eyes for me? The date scrawled on the back was 2 nights earlier, which meant it wasn't the past he was stealing anymore. It was the present. And now, every night, when the wind rattles the window and the snow presses thick against the glass, I lie in bed wondering, was I ever truly sleeping? Or was I always awake, watching him, watching me? I never trusted silence, not really. Silence has a way of stretching, of pressing against you until you feel your own thoughts like footsteps in a hallway where no one should be. That night, January 18, 2022, at 10:42 p.m., silence was the first thing that told me something was wrong. The blizzard outside battered the glass doors of Target. 2700 State Street, Bismarck, snow not falling but roaring sideways, carried on the kind of wind that sounded less like air and more like a voice caught between words. I'd been closing manager for a little over a year, and the routine was burned into me. Check the registers, make sure the last carts were stowed, doors locked, paperwork signed. That night it was Matt, the new guy, stuck in the break room finishing inventory corrections. He was good enough at the job, but always distracted, a little too quick to smile at the wrong time. I moved through the store with my clipboard, double-checking locks. My coworkers always teased me about this part. Paranoid, they'd say, laughing. I laughed too. They didn't know the real reason I checked, rechecked, and checked again. They didn't know about Kyle. 2 years since I left him. 2 years since the restraining orders. 2 years since the nights he'd wait in the parking lot, headlights off, car idling. They all ended with promises, apologies, gifts shoved into my locker at work. Voicemails left until my phone overflowed. It ended with threats too. Whispered ones meant to rot in my head. "You'll come back, little bird. You always do." The papers expired last fall. By then I'd convinced myself it was over anyway. because he died in a highway crash 2 towns over. I remember reading the article online, my hands shaking, my chest both hollow and light. And still, some nights when the heat kicked on and the vents hummed, I swore I could hear him, humming that lullaby he used to sing when he wanted me to stay quiet. The storm pressed its weight against the glass that night, moaning like voices begging to come in. The mannequins in women's wear leaned just an inch closer in the shadows. Blank faces turned as if to watch me. Then the intercom crackled. Not the chime. Not the polite store closing in 10 minutes. Just static fizzing like breath caught in wires. Then words, "I see you, little bird. Don't fly away." I froze so hard my throat locked. No one else would say that. No one else knew. My grip tightened on the keys until the teeth bit into my palm. "Matt?" My voice was too high, strained. "That you? Come on, don't screw around. Nothing. Just the hum of lights, the groan of the storm." I forced myself toward the break room. The door stood ajar, swinging slightly, coffee dripping onto the floor from the pot. Matt's clipboard lay on the table, pen rolling until it clattered to the ground. "Matt?" I called. No answer. That was when I noticed the footprints. Wet, melted snow pressed into the tile, too large to be mine, too heavy. They led not out of the break room, but deeper, toward electronics. My phone buzzed and I nearly dropped it. An unknown number. I shouldn't have opened it. I did anyway. "You look tired, little bird. Still pretty, though." The phone slipped from my fingers, cracking against the tile. My stomach lurched like I'd swallowed ice. I told myself it was a prank. A coincidence. Maybe Matt messing with me. He had a weird sense of humor. I remembered him earlier humming while counting tills, a low tune under his breath. At the time, it had barely registered, but now the memory slid sharp into me. Was it the same melody Kyle used to hum? Had Matt smirked when I'd caught him doing it? Had he looked just a second too amused? My mind spun. The smell reached me next. Cologne. His cologne. Cheap, sweet, the kind that clung to my clothes long after I begged him to leave. I turned, my pulse thrumming. The aisles felt stretched, warped. Movement flickered behind the glow of flat screens and electronics. My mouth went dry. I bolted for the fire exit, lungs pulling in air that felt too thick. My hands clutched the handle. It rattled but didn't move. A chain wound through the bar, padlocked from the outside. I staggered back. The lights went out, one aisle at a time. Darkness marching toward me. And beneath it all, soft, steady, came that hum. That song, Kyle's song. I spun, searching the shadows, and in the corner of my eye I swore I saw him. Just the outline, the tilt of a head, the angle of shoulders I knew too well. Then gone, my chest squeezed tight, my vision blurred. I backed into a display, knocking phone cases to the floor. My hands groped desperately until they found the fire extinguisher. I grabbed it and swung, shattering the glass of the display window. Shards exploded, slicing my palms, embedding in my coat. The alarm shrieked, but the humming didn't stop. I crawled through, snow burning my lungs as I stumbled into the storm. The wind howled, carrying a new sound with it, a laugh. Low, familiar, riding the blizzard like it belonged there. I ran. My legs slipped, my breath tore my throat raw. Somewhere behind me, the hum followed. I collapsed near the cart corral, half buried in drifts. My hands bled, my vision fading. I thought I heard the laugh again, closer, then everything went black. When I woke, morning light glared off the snow. Police lights pulsed red and blue. They told me they'd found Matt in the stockroom, unconscious, head split open. No memory, no sign of who did it. The fire exit had been welded shut. Every camera feed was static. They bagged my coat for evidence, though they never found fingerprints. I tried washing it later, 3 times. The cologne never left, and when I emptied my pocket that night, something fell out onto the floorboards, a shard of glass. Whole, unbroken. I picked it up with trembling fingers, but before I could toss it, a sound rose faintly from within it. That hum. Kyle's hum. And I understood then, this wasn't about a store or a storm or a night gone wrong. Whatever he was now, alive, dead, something else entirely, he had found a way to carry himself home with me, and the silence was gone for good. I didn't throw the glass away. I told myself I would, but every time I reached for it, my hand pulled back like it was too hot. It didn't even look sharp anymore, just smooth like a piece of sea glass faintly glinting in the light. And every night when I lay in bed, I swore I could hear it humming, soft, low, the melody that once curled around me like a leash. The police didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. They wrote it up as vandalism. Maybe a break-in, though they couldn't explain the welded door. They interviewed Matt, but he remembered nothing. Just filing paperwork and then a sudden weight behind his eyes like someone had hit him from inside his own skull. When I saw him later, his head wrapped in gauze, he gave me a look that lingered too long. "Scary night," he said. His smile was small, strained. Still, it was a smile. And in that moment, the thought I'd tried to bury clawed back up. What if Matt wasn't innocent? What if the humming I'd heard earlier from his lips wasn't a coincidence, but a rehearsal? What if the blow to his head was staged or self-inflicted? What if he'd been waiting in the shadows, chain and padlock already in place, phone in hand? I hated myself for thinking it. But once suspicion rooted itself, it spread fast. Every time he passed me at work, I wondered if his eyes lingered too long. If his voice dipped into that same low register Kyle had once used to soothe and scold in the same breath. I stopped taking closing shifts, begged to swap with day managers. The others rolled their eyes. Paranoid, they teased again. If only they knew. If only they understood what it was like to live with someone who'd memorized every weakness, every habit. Kyle had been so charming at first. Everyone said we looked good together. He brought flowers to my job, slipped notes into my bag. He called me little bird, his voice soft as if I was something delicate, fragile, to be protected. I didn't see not then that protecting meant caging. That little bird meant clipped wings. I remembered the night he locked the door while we argued. I'd shouted, panicked, but he'd only hummed, low and steady, until my own voice broke against it. He liked to win with silence. That silence found me again now everywhere. At night, the shard glowed faintly on my nightstand, pale blue like TV static. When I covered it with a towel, the hum grew louder, as if muffled but angrier. Twice I dreamed of Kyle standing at the end of my bed, his face pale, wet from snow, whispering, "Don't fly away." When I woke, the towel would be on the floor, and the shard uncovered. I tried leaving it outside in the dumpster. The next morning, it was on my kitchen counter, gleaming. I stopped telling people. I'd learned years ago that nothing discredits a woman faster than calling her stalker a ghost. Still, I couldn't shake Matt. His injury didn't erase the doubt. Sometimes I thought I saw a flicker of recognition when the intercom crackled, or the way he tilted his head when I flinched at a familiar tune. Once in the stockroom, I caught him holding my coat a second too long, nose buried in the collar. When I asked what he was doing, he jumped back, muttering something about checking the tag. But I smelled it then, that cologne. I barely slept. My apartment felt smaller each night, shadows stretching long against the walls. I'd lie in bed, covers pulled to my chin, the shard glowing faintly, and wonder if the hum was real or only in my head. Sometimes I'd think I heard footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes I'd find my window cracked open, though I hadn't touched it. And then the text started again. "Don't fly away. Little bird, home soon." Blocked numbers every time. The police shrugged. Could be a spoofing app, they said. Could be anyone. But I knew. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was closing again. No choice this time, no one to swap. Matt was there too, pale under the lights, still moving slower since the injury. He watched me while he filled the till count. I tried not to notice. The storm outside was quieter, just flurries this time. But inside, the silence pressed heavier than before. I double-checked the locks, again and again. The intercom clicked. My breath stopped. "I see you, little bird. Don't fly away." The same words, the same tone. Not static this time. Clear. Almost warm. I whipped around. Matt was staring at me, expression unreadable. "Did you hear that?" I demanded. He blinked. "Hear what? You didn't?" But the words caught in my throat. Because right then, from somewhere in the shadows of the store came humming. Low, steady, wrapping around me like it always had. Matt's face drained of color. He did hear it. I saw it in his eyes. The lights flickered, cutting in and out until only the exit signs glowed. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the fire door, but when I shoved, the handle didn't move. Welded again, the humming grew louder. A laugh followed, curling up from the aisles like smoke. Matt stumbled, clutching his head. It's in my..." He crumpled, gasping, eyes rolling back. I screamed his name, but no sound left my mouth. Just breath, just terror. The shard was in my pocket. I felt it, heavy, burning cold. The hum vibrated through me until my teeth rattled. I swung at the nearest glass display with a fire extinguisher. The crash was deafening. Shards sliced my arms, but I forced myself through, snow cutting my face. The storm outside wasn't loud enough to drown him out. Not this time. The humming followed, threaded with laughter carried on the wind. My legs buckled, dragging me into the drift. I reached into my pocket, desperate to throw the shard away, but my fingers locked around it like it was part of me. The hum poured from it, louder now, alive, and then his voice. Clear, whispering against my ear, though no one was there. Home soon. Little bird. When the police found me at dawn, I was curled in the snow again. Glass embedded in my hands, eyes swollen from tears. They said Matt was unconscious in the stockroom. Worse than before, bruises like he'd been beaten. No footage. No intruder, just static. Back home, I tried again to throw the shard away. Dumpster, river, even the stove flame. Each time it returned, always humming. Now I keep it on my nightstand. I don't bother hiding it. It hums while I sleep, while I wake, while I breathe. Sometimes I think I smell his cologne in the vents. Sometimes I think I see him reflected in the dark glass of the TV. Maybe Kyle died in that crash. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he's something else now. Something that learned how to live inside silence, inside wires, inside me. Because I understand now. This isn't about running anymore. You can't run from something that already lives in your lungs. What if the dead don't stay gone when they found a way to carry themselves inside you? Silence at night is supposed to mean safety, but for me, silence has always carried teeth. That's what I told myself as I sat hunched at my desk at Davenport and Cubber Financial Services, eyes stinging from the glow of my monitor. January 18th, 2022. 2 a.m. snowstorm raging outside, the city swallowed whole. From the 22nd floor, Minneapolis was nothing but a blur of white against glass. I should have felt insulated, safe inside the sterile walls of corporate order. But the longer I sat there, the more the silence pressed down until it felt like something was listening. "You're gonna marry that calculator at this rate," Tasha joked from the desk across from mine. She leaned back, her black curls spilling down her hoodie, sliding a paper cup of coffee toward me. The coffee smelled burnt, the kind of sludge brewed from a machine that hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. But I forced a smile. "Better than marrying a spreadsheet," I muttered. She snorted, spun back to her screen. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the space between us, steady and too loud. I shifted in my chair, rubbing at the stiff muscle in my neck. That's when I opened my desk drawer for a pen and froze. A folded slip of paper rested neatly on top of my stapler, not our bright white company printer paper. This was creased, yellowed like it had been carried in someone's wallet for years. I knew before I touched it. The dread was already in my blood. I picked it up with shaking fingers, unfolded it. "I still know when you're alone. Caleb." The handwriting crawled across the page, sharp and deliberate. My stomach turned cold, heavier than the storm pressing against the glass. 3 years since I'd seen that script. 3 years since the night I locked myself in my bathroom while he pounded at the door, bleeding through his knuckles, swearing he'd never let me go. He'd gone to jail after that, briefly. Then he disappeared. But no one had entered this building after midnight. Security was airtight. I shoved the note back into the drawer so fast it crinkled, my pulse hammering like I'd run a mile. When I looked up, Tasha was watching me. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thought I left something at home." She gave me the look, the one that meant she didn't buy it, but turned back to her screen. I clenched my hands on my knees until the sting grounded me. Maybe someone was playing a prank, maybe. But then the lights above us flickered. A low ripple rolled across the row of monitors like a wave of static through water. The intercom above our heads crackled on and a voice whispered, "Elena." I nearly tipped my chair over, jerking back. Tasha looked up, wide-eyed. "What the hell was that?" The intercom clicked off, leaving the hum of silence, louder than before. "Storm must be screwing with the wiring," she said, but her laugh was thin, brittle. I didn't tell her what I heard in that whisper, that it wasn't just my name. There had been weight in it. A memory only I would recognize carried in the tone. The way he used to murmur into my hair when he thought I was asleep. I worked with my hands trembling on the keyboard, numbers blurred. At one point I looked up, caught my reflection in the glass partition, except I wasn't alone. A figure stood behind me, indistinct, draped in a gray coat. I twisted around. Empty hallway, just humming lights and marble floors. When I looked back, the reflection was gone. I pressed my palms to my face, tried to breathe. I'd promised myself I wouldn't do this anymore. Spiral into old fears, let Caleb haunt me when I should be free. Therapy, restraining orders, moving apartments, changing numbers, I'd done it all. But fear has a way of sneaking back, wearing familiar coats. Then my laptop pinged. Draft emails, dozens of them, none sent, all written tonight. The first, she walked to work at 8:42 a.m. in her navy coat, muttering about the cold. The second, she ate a turkey sandwich at 12:03 p.m., left the crusts. Another, she whispered, "You're fine. You're fine," to herself in the mirror. I clutched the desk so hard my nails bent. Those were my private details. Things no one else could have known. "Stop it," I whispered, slamming the drafts closed. I told myself it was a virus, some sick hacker. But deep down I knew. When Tasha excused herself for the bathroom, I kept glancing at the clock. 10 minutes, 15, 20. Finally I stood, heels clicking against the floor as I followed the hall to the stairwell. Her ID badge lay on the second step, the photo smeared with something dark. Rust, I told myself. But when I touched it, flakes of red clung to my fingers. I staggered back, heart slamming. The stairwell door eased shut behind me, a soft slam that made the air vibrate. That was when the lights went out. Every floor, every hallway. Pure black, I ran. Heels slipping, breath ragged, laptop bag clutched to my chest. Footsteps pounded behind me, too close, too steady. I burst through the lobby doors into the storm, snow blinding my eyes. My car waited under its shell of frost, across the windshield carved deep into the ice. "Till death, Elena." I scraped at the glass with shaking hands, scrambled inside. The passenger seat rattled as though something unseen shifted there. My breath fogged the windshield as I drove blindly into the storm, tires spinning. I told myself it was the storm. The wind, my imagination. But the truth whispered louder. He was back. Even after the firm's investigation, security swearing no intruders. Tasha swearing she just left early, her badge scrubbed clean. The haunting followed me home. Draft emails multiplied on my laptop. My front door unlocked by itself. And sometimes just before sleep dragged me under. I felt it. Breath against my neck, hot and damp, a whisper curling against my skin. "You'll never really leave me." I told myself the storm would fade. That exhaustion was twisting my senses, but storms follow you, even indoors, especially indoors. The next morning I came into the office early. Everyone else was still stuck at home, snowbound. The lobby lights buzzed to life when I swiped my badge, but the sound carried something else faint, just behind the hum. My name, stretched thin, caught in static. I froze in the revolving door. The lobby guard looked up from his thermos. "Something wrong, Vargas?" I forced a laugh. "Just long night." That was when I saw it. My coffee mug, the one I kept locked in my desk, navy ceramic, chipped at the rim. I hadn't left it out, but there it sat, centered perfectly on my desk. Steam curled from it like someone had just poured it. Inside wasn't coffee. It was water, cloudy and faintly sweet. Floating at the bottom was a folded scrap of paper, soaked to translucence. I fished it out with trembling fingers. The letters bled but were still legible. "I like how you hum to yourself before you start typing, just like you used to." My throat tightened. That was something Caleb used to tease me about when I studied at night, unaware I was doing it. Something I'd never told anyone. I dropped the note, water streaking my desk. Maybe someone had gone through my diary, I thought suddenly. My stomach turned cold. At home I'd kept journals, pages filled with private thoughts, little confessions. Had I left one in my bag? I bolted out of the office at lunch, nearly slipping on the marble floor. At my apartment I tore through my desk drawers. My diary was there under a stack of unpaid bills. But wedged between its pages, one of them had been replaced with something else. Another note. Page 47 was always my favorite. "The way you wrote about our night at the lake, you sounded so in love." "Still do." I flipped to page 47. My words stared back at me. Words I'd written years ago. A confession about how safe I'd felt wrapped in his arms under the stars, before things curdled into bruises and fear. I slammed the diary shut, breath shuddering out. He couldn't know that. He wasn't supposed to know that. I decided I'd prove it. That night I set up my phone camera facing my bed. If someone was coming into my apartment, if Caleb was sneaking in somehow, I'd catch him. I left the phone recording as I tried to sleep, heart hammering too loud for rest. At dawn, I replayed the footage, palms sweating. The screen showed me tossing, turning, sitting up once to drink water. Hours stretched on, but no one else appeared. Not a shadow, not a door opening. Nothing but me, frantic in my sheets. I hurled the phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. My proof had betrayed me. The next day, I went to maintenance under the pretense of reporting noise. "I keep hearing humming in my vents," I told the guy, a wiry man with nicotine-stained nails. He climbed a ladder, unscrewed the grate above my cubicle. "Clean as it gets," he said, shining a flashlight in. "No loose wiring. No drafts." When he left, the humming started again, louder, a tune I recognized. Caleb's old whistle off key. I pressed my palms over my ears until my nails dug into my scalp. The final break came 3 nights later. I dozed on my couch. Light still on, laptop open to a half-finished spreadsheet. I woke to the smell of cologne. Caleb's cheap, heavy musk, the kind that clung to sweaters for days. My eyes flew open. On the coffee table sat my work laptop. The screen filled with a single open document. "You looked beautiful tonight in your navy coat. You don't know how much I miss brushing your hair back when it falls in your eyes. You should check your pocket." My shaking hand went to my coat draped over the couch. I slipped my fingers into the pocket and froze. A small object rested there, warm from my body heat, though I hadn't worn the coat all evening. I pulled it out slowly. A hair clip, not just any clip, the clip. Pink plastic, cheap. The one I'd lost in his apartment years ago after a fight when he ripped it from my hair and tossed it across the room. I'd searched for it. Never found it. Yet here it was, resting in my palm. My skin went cold. My mind screamed denial, but my body knew the truth. This hadn't just been watching or whispering or scratching words into glass. This was touch. This was invasion. I dropped the clip like it burned me. The lights flickered overhead, a low electric sigh. I whispered, "What do you want?" Silence. Then a breath against my ear, warm and damp, though I was alone in my living room. "To remind you, you're mine." I stayed frozen until the sun came up. Clip still lying on the carpet like evidence from a crime no one would ever believe. And that's when I understood the real horror. Caleb wasn't back to haunt the office. He wasn't trapped in the past. He had found his way into my present, into my body, into the private spaces of my life. He could reach me anytime, anywhere. And I would never really know if it was my mind fracturing or if the storm had finally found a home inside me. I always thought silence meant safety. But that night in Cleveland, I learned silence can hold teeth. The kind that wait in the dark, patient, gnawing at your nerves until you're nothing but raw skin and a racing pulse. It was January 18th, 2017, a night when the snow didn't fall so much as devour. Whole blocks vanished into white. Buildings erased one by one until even the familiar streets around Euclid Avenue felt unmoored, floating somewhere outside of time. The storm had shut down most of the city. Stores dark, traffic lights blinking pointlessly into the void. Not a single car daring to crawl through the glassy streets. Inside the Velvet Bean Cafe, though, we were still technically open. At least that's what the neon sign claimed, sputtering against the snow-blind windows. But the truth was no one was coming. Not tonight. Not through this storm. I lingered anyway. I lingered because I hated going home to my one bedroom on East 9th, where the silence pressed too tight against the walls, where every creak of the radiator set my nerves on edge. Silence has never been kind to me. It sharpens things I'd rather leave dull, like the memory of my father's boots walking out the door when I was 12, or Eric's voice, low and coiled, promising he would always know where to find me. So I stayed late, wiping down counters that already gleamed, refilling napkin holders no one would use. Gina, my manager, was pacing by the window, her parka already zipped up to her chin. She kept muttering about whether her car would even start in this weather. Caleb, the new barista, hummed under his breath while drying mugs. His tune was some old classic rock riff, something my dad used to tap along to on the steering wheel years ago. I recognized it faintly, but in the stillness of the cafe, even that harmless melody felt wrong, thin, almost mocking. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied, though the air seemed to hold its breath afterward. That was when the feeling began. A prickle along the back of my neck, as though someone were standing just out of sight, eyes fixed on me. The windows at the front looked out into nothing but snow, thick enough that the world might as well have ceased to exist. But the longer I stared at that blur of white, the more it felt like something stared back. "Ghost customers," Gina joked suddenly, pulling on her gloves. She laughed, too sharp, like she didn't quite believe her own joke. Caleb snorted, but it cracked halfway, coming out wrong. I tried to brush it off until the phone rang. The cafe's landline hardly ever rang. When it did, it was deliveries or some lost customer asking about ours. But this time the ringtone wasn't the usual electronic chirp. It was different. Off, I froze. My blood went cold. It was a melody, a specific one. 3 notes rising, 2 falling, over and over. The tune Eric used to whistle in the mornings when he made coffee in my kitchen, barefoot, humming like he owned the air, a song no one else would know. Gina frowned, picked up the receiver. "Velvet Bean Cafe," she said, cheerful but tentative. Silence. Then her expression changed. Confusion, irritation, unease. She pressed the receiver tighter. "Is someone there?" "Hello?" Her brow furrowed. "That's weird." "It's humming. Some old tune I can't place. Like someone's holding the phone and humming." My stomach flipped. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Gina slammed the receiver down. "Kids pulling pranks," she muttered, but her hands shook as she yanked her hood up. "I'm digging out my car before this storm buries me alive. Lock up if you stay late." The door shut behind her. The cafe felt instantly smaller. Caleb glanced at me. "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." I forced a laugh. "I just don't like prank calls, but I knew better." That was no prank. That was Eric's tune. The silence after Gina left pressed harder. Caleb hummed again, but it grated on me now, jagged against my nerves. I turned toward the windows. That was when I saw it. At first it seemed like the condensation had just streaked oddly across the glass. But no, it was deliberate. Shapes. Letters. My name. Danielle. Written crudely in dripping condensation. Written from the outside, my throat closed. I pointed with a shaking finger. "Do you see that?" Caleb squinted, frowned. Then he laughed, too loud. "You're seeing things, Danny. It's just fog. You need some sleep." His disbelief landed like a slap. Heat rose in my face, though my whole body was freezing. "It's not fog. Look, it's my name." "Seriously, you've been on your feet too long," he said, turning back to the mugs. "Storm's messing with your head, but I knew what I saw. I knew, and the worst part wasn't the letters themselves. It was the way they dripped, slowly, as though a finger had just pulled away. As though whoever wrote them was still standing there, watching. We went back to cleaning in brittle silence. I tried to distract myself, but every sound magnified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the distant groan of the storm, then came the pounding, from the alley door at the back. Heavy, deliberate, not the frantic thud of wind, but the slow, measured rhythm of knuckles rapping on wood. I froze. Caleb dropped a mug, the crash echoing too loud in the silence, and then I heard it. Danielle. My name. Low, drawn out, coiled with satisfaction. Danielle. It's time to come home. My knees nearly buckled. That voice. His voice. Caleb swore, grabbed my arm. "Who the hell? Do you know him?" I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight, my lungs refusing to work. The lights flickered once more, then died. We were swallowed by darkness. The cafe was silent, save for the storm's roar outside and the faint shuffle of boots across the front floor. A shadow leaned against the window, outlined in the pale glow of snow. We stumbled down the back hall, groping through blackness, the sound of wood groaning behind us. Caleb muttered, "Doors are locked, he can't get in." But his whisper cracked into panic. We shoved into the storage room, pressed ourselves against the wall. My pulse thundered so hard it drowned everything else. I tried to steady my breathing, but the air felt thick, suffocating. Then I remembered the delivery chute. A narrow, brutal squeeze, but the only way out. "Go," I hissed at Caleb. He shook his head wide-eyed. "You first, hurry." My hands shook as I pulled the chute open. The metal screeched too loud. I braced, shoved myself in. The edges tore into my palms, my ribs crushed, but adrenaline made me fit. I scraped through, tumbled into the snow outside. The cold hit like a slap, stealing my breath. For a moment I thought I was safe, until I heard it, a whisper, right behind me, though Eric was still inside. though I'd left him behind the locked walls. His voice brushed my ear, intimate, certain. "I'll see you at home." "Danielle." The snow swallowed me, white against black, and for a few moments I could only crawl, gasping, trying to make my body obey. My palms were raw, burning from the chute's sharp edges. My knees screamed from the fall. But it was my ears I couldn't control, straining against the howl of the storm, listening for that voice again. "I'll see you at home, Danielle." It clung to me closer than the wind. Behind me, muffled through the wall of the cafe, I could hear a crash, the splinter of wood, the shutter of glass breaking. Caleb's shout cut off sharp, then silence. My heart clawed at my ribs. I wanted to go back. I wanted to run. I couldn't move either way. I pushed myself up, staggered through the snow until my boots found the rutted edge of the alley. The storm was a wall, blinding, erasing street lights, signs, everything. My breath came out in violent clouds. The city felt deserted, like I had been dropped into a place no longer mine. I dug my phone out with trembling hands, the screen flickering against the dark. No signal, no bars, just a blinking SOS that mocked me. I kept moving one step at a time, hugging the brick wall as if it could anchor me. My thoughts spun in loops. If he was still inside, how did I hear his whisper outside? Was he in two places at once, or had my mind cracked wide open, letting him in again the way it used to when every text and voicemail left me shaking? By the time I reached the corner of Euclid, blue and red lights cut faintly through the storm. I stumbled toward them, waving, my voice tearing at my throat. Two officers pulled me into the back of the cruiser, wrapping me in a blanket. They asked questions: what happened, who was inside, was I hurt? My words tangled, but I managed Eric's name. By the time we circled back to the cafe, the storm had eased just enough for the glass storefront to come into view. One of the front windows was shattered inward, jagged teeth of glass catching the weak light, and inside, hunched on the counter like a grotesque statue, was Eric. He was half frozen, lips blue, hair caked with snow, but his face was stretched into a smile that didn't belong to any human I remembered. His eyes tracked me instantly, as if I were the only person in the world. "She came back," he rasped to the officers. His teeth chattered, but the words came steady. "I told you. We were meant to be locked in together." One of the cops pulled him down, cuffed him, wrapped a foil blanket around his shoulders. He didn't fight. He just kept smiling. And the whole time his gaze never left mine. They questioned me for hours at the precinct. Asked about the restraining order, the history, the threats. I gave them the same details I'd already given months earlier, but this time my voice shook with new edges. When they asked what made me certain it was Eric at the back door, I froze. I couldn't say because he whispered my name through wood and storm, because the phone sang a tune only he knew, because his voice followed me outside even when his body was trapped in. I just said, "I know his voice." They nodded. Wrote it down. Another obsessed ex, another statistic. They told me I was lucky he hadn't hurt me this time. They said the system would keep me safe. I wanted to believe them. But when I stepped out of the station into the pale morning, something inside me knew safety was a word that didn't belong to me anymore. The days blurred. I stopped going to the cafe. Gina left me a voicemail saying she understood, though her voice shook as if she had seen more than she admitted. Caleb didn't call at all. I didn't know if he was angry or scared or worse. At home, the silence grew sharper. Every creak in the radiator made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the glass sounded like knuckles rapping, slow and steady. I shoved a dresser against the window, but it didn't help, because sometimes in the dead middle of night the phone rang. Not my cell. The landline I barely used, tucked on the kitchen counter. It rang with the same tune. 3 notes rising, 2 falling. Over and over, I stopped answering after the first time when all I heard was humming. But the sound burrowed into me. Even when the phone was silent, I caught myself humming it under my breath, like a sickness that spread without permission. The nightmares began next. In them, I was back in the cafe. The snow sealed the doors, the windows, the chute. The lights flickered, then died, plunging me into dark. And when they flared back on, I was never alone. Sometimes it was Eric smiling from behind the counter. Sometimes it was a shadow with no face, just teeth. Sometimes it was me, reflected in the glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear, but always at the end, a whisper. "I'll see you at home." And I'd wake, gasping, drenched in sweat, staring at the dresser pressed against my window. The police called weeks later. They said Eric had been transferred to a psychiatric facility. that he wasn't contesting the charges, that he wasn't a danger to me anymore. But that night the humming returned, soft at first. Not from the phone. From the other side of the window, I pressed my ear to the glass. The storm had long since passed, but the pane was cold, wet with condensation. And there, slowly forming as though a finger traced it from outside, Danielle. The letters dripped, the water sliding like tears. I stumbled back, my knees weak. My voice cracked as I whispered, "You're not here. You're not here." But then the knocking started, slow, steady, like falling snow. And through the rhythm came his voice, close as breath, impossibly near. "I told you, we were meant to be locked in together." I don't know if Eric is truly behind those knocks or if he left something of himself inside me the night he whispered in the storm. I don't know if the system failed or if my mind has finally split open, making room for him again. But I do know this. Silence doesn't mean safety. Silence means he's listening. And when the knocking comes, I can't tell anymore if it's outside the glass or inside my chest, because the storm passed. But the silence he left behind still feels like a trap. The cold always finds the cracks. It knows where we keep our softest places. That's how it felt on January 14th, 2019. As I closed the register at the Dollar Tree on Erie Boulevard in Syracuse, New York. The fluorescent lights buzzed low and uneven, a pulse in my skull, as I stacked the till coins in neat little columns, counting them twice to make sure the totals matched. I liked order. Numbers could be trusted. Numbers didn't leave you in the middle of a snowstorm with your reflection grinning back at you. I'd been working here for almost a year. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't anything like my brief, bright life in art school before I quit. But the routine was everything. Open at 9, clean the aisles by midnight, lock up, and walk to my car along the same path every night. I had a rhythm. Predictability was a shield. "Girl, you're like clockwork," Rena said that night, looping her scarf and jiggling her keys like she couldn't wait to leave. "Someone could set a watch by you." Her voice was warm, teasing, and for a split second it made my stomach relax. But even as I smiled, a prickle of dread crawled up my spine. Clockwork implies someone is watching. Someone could measure you. Someone might even want to stop the hands from turning. 2 years ago, I had learned what that meant. Derek Halbrook. He had been everything at once: boyfriend, shadow, obsession. I left him because the closeness felt like control masquerading as love. Because I realized that the man I adored could vanish me with a glance or a word. After the breakup, he didn't just move on. He moved in on my life. I got a restraining order, legal protection, proof that society said this is not allowed, but that didn't stop him. Laws are paper. Fear is embedded in your veins. At first, the notes were small, almost playful. Little drawings of eyes on scraps of paper, an abstracted gaze meant to watch. I found one tucked into the sleeve of my coat. Another slipped beneath the chipped coffee mug I used every morning in the break room. I laughed it off. Who else could it be? A bored coworker? Someone pulling a prank? But even as I rationalized, the seed of unease took root. The eyes felt deliberate, intimate in a way that only someone who knew me could achieve. And then they got more personal. I woke one morning to find a note folded neatly between the pages of my diary. The paper smelled faintly of coffee and something else. Cologne, sharp and clean. The same smell Derek used to wear when he lingered too close, claiming space as his own. The note had one eye drawn in precise detail. A pupil that seemed almost alive staring at me from the page. My hands shook, but I did not scream. I could not. Screaming admits to the world that someone has invaded your life, and I had trained myself for restraint. I tried to rationalize. I bought a small security camera, one of those consumer-grade watch-your-home devices, and placed it in my living room with a wide-angle lens. I tucked it behind books and set it to record overnight. The next morning, I watched myself pacing in my apartment, checking locks, smoothing the table with trembling fingers, sipping cold tea. And nothing else appeared. No intruder, no hand. Only me moving in loops, the camera a silent witness to my terror. The footage was comforting and horrifying at once. It confirmed one thing. If someone was entering my life, it was not through the doors, the windows, or even my front hall. The invasion was subtle, psychological, intimate. And the realization that the perpetrator could be in my mind as much as my space, was the thing that gnawed at me. Sleep became impossible. I left the radio on at night to mask imagined footsteps. I covered mirrors, fearful of reflections, of someone using them to enter my sight without being present. Even Rena, who lived far away and had only glimpsed fragments of my fear, became a lifeline. "Hon," she said over the phone, voice full of exasperation and care. "You have to live. You can't spend your nights waiting for shadows." I nodded, but my knuckles dug into the phone as if holding on harder could summon some kind of control. The notes escalated. One appeared inside the sleeve of the jacket I used to wear when I wanted to feel brave. Another taped beneath the seat of my car, folded so tightly the creases cracked like old bones. They were no longer just sketches, they were messages, eyes drawn with painstaking care, positioned where only I would find them. I began to see the pattern. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. He was mapping me, my habits, my private rituals, and leaving traces to remind me that he knew. The first direct sighting happened in a window. I was scraping frost from my windshield, bundled in layers, when the glass behind me glimmered. A reflection, but not mine. A face leaning in, caught in the dim orange of the lot lights. He smiled, not fully, not like a friend, just enough to curl the corners of his mouth in a way that felt intimate and violating. His lips moved, slow and deliberate, forming a single word, and when I blinked, it was gone. But my mind carried it, burned it into memory. Mine. I ran. The icy lot threw me forward, hands and knees scraping against hard frost. The scream lodged in my throat, half formed, half ignored. Rena arrived in time to see me stagger to the streetlights, slipping in the black ice. The figure, whoever it was, had vanished before security arrived. After that, I tried strategies that felt absurd. I rearranged furniture, moved small objects, taped paper clips to jackets. I slept with 2 cameras rolling. I checked vents, pipes, anything that might have been an overlooked entry point. Nothing appeared on film except me. The small loops of motion, the tremble of my hands, the shallow breathing that defined my nights. It became impossible to tell what was real and what wasn't. Humming filled the walls, not music, just frequency, low and tactile, a vibration under skin and bone. Sometimes I would see shadows twist slightly in the corner of my eye, only to vanish when I turned fully. The boundaries of my apartment became a topography of fear, each corner and surface cataloged for potential intrusion. The psychological invasion blurred into physical. One night I found a hairpin in my pocket that had been missing for 3 years, the exact one I lost during happier, younger times. The plastic bore the tiny nick I remembered. The scent, faint but unmistakable, reminded me of Derek's cologne. It was proof that the space between thought and body had been violated, that someone could touch me without me waking, without any machine to record it. I moved apartments, changed numbers, tried to sever every trace, but the pattern persisted. Scraps of paper, petals from flowers, tiny objects once lost or discarded appeared in my clothing, my bags, my mug. Each one was a signature, each one an assertion of presence, of power, of possession. By now I had trained myself to notice everything. Every footstep, every hum, every subtle smell of citrus and leather. I could not sleep in darkness. I could not leave mugs unattended. Mirrors remained covered. The world had narrowed into a series of protective gestures, rituals to keep terror at bay. And yet, despite all precautions, he still managed to announce himself. The movement, the whisper, the trace left behind, the hairpin in my pocket, the petal in my hand, the eyes in my diary. They were more than reminders. They were proof that Derek Halbrook could enter my private life at will, bypass any surveillance, evade any rational barrier, and imprint his presence on me without detection. And no matter how much I prepared, there was always the knowledge that he could do it again. That he could choose the moment and I would discover it only after the fact, in the way one finds poison in a cup of tea. I had learned to exist in the presence of fear, to live with it like a new organ. But organs fail, and when they do, the world becomes a place of sudden, intimate horror. The nights had grown longer, colder, and somehow denser. Syracuse winters were always brutal, but this year the frost seemed to cling to the very edges of my thoughts, coating them in a brittle, fragile glaze. Every sound became a warning, every shadow a messenger. Even the Dollar Tree on Erie Boulevard, once a refuge of routine, felt like a stage set for invasion. I found myself lingering in the aisles after closing. I pretended to straighten the shelves, but really I was listening. Listening for footsteps that didn't belong to me. Listening for hums beneath the fluorescent flicker. Sometimes I imagined him standing just outside the sliding doors, hands in pockets, watching me in a way that made every move feel scripted. And sometimes I was sure I could hear my name whispered from between the rows of canned goods. It was late, later than usual, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not while the air in the store smelled faintly of sanitizer and cinnamon, a strange combination that now set my nerves on edge. I wiped my palms on my apron, noting the way the fabric felt rough against my skin. My eyes drifted toward the break room, toward the mug where the first eye had appeared. I froze. There it was again, a scrap of paper tucked just so with a single pupil staring at me. I didn't remember leaving it there. I hadn't even touched the mug today. I held the paper with trembling fingers. The pupil seemed to shift when I blinked, following me as if it had awareness. A cold, creeping dread climbed my spine and I felt my pulse in my throat. I wanted to rationalize, tell myself that it was me, that I had placed it absent-mindedly and simply forgotten. But my gut refused to lie. This wasn't me. I tried calling Rena again. My phone rang once, twice, then died mid-ring. The battery had been full an hour ago. I checked the outlet. No explanation. I checked the phone itself. Nothing. And then, just as I replaced it in my pocket, I felt it. A breath, warm and deliberate, across my neck. My hair lifted. Goosebumps traveled like fire. I spun. The aisle was empty. I was alone. I left the break room and moved to the front of the store, leaning against the glass doors. Outside, the snow was still falling soft and muffling. Footprints crisscrossed the lot. Mine, some indeterminate others. I could swear one pair moved in the wrong pattern, as though tracing me, looping and returning. And then, just outside the glass, I saw him. Derek Halbrook. I froze. My stomach lurched. But even then, I couldn't scream. His reflection was perfect. The world outside the doors didn't move, only him. His eyes were dark, unblinking, and his lips curled into the same chilling half-smile. I could hear nothing. No wind, no traffic, just him. And then, without moving a muscle, he lifted one hand and waved. Or perhaps he didn't wave. Perhaps it was just the tilt of his fingers, the suggestion of movement. My brain refused to decide. I stumbled back. The door handle was icy under my fingers. My legs shook as I fumbled for my keys. I wanted to run, to call for help, but my voice failed. The reflection remained, now impossibly close, pressed against the glass from the inside, from the outside, from somewhere I could not locate. It didn't matter. The violation was total. I tore through the store, desperate, grabbing items at random, paper towels, hand sanitizer, nothing meaningful, and hurled them behind me. The sound of the plastic bottles shattering against the floor echoed loud and metallic, and still the reflection remained, tilting its head, smiling, mouthing something I could not understand. Mine. I bolted. The icy lot tore at my boots, but I didn't care. I felt my body slip, slide, scrape across the frost. Screams tore from my throat, raw and ragged. The security light above flickered. Shadows leapt across the asphalt, and then silence. I didn't stop running until the orange glow of streetlights gave way to the gray of the early morning. I reached Rena's apartment. My chest burned. My fingers were raw. I could barely speak, but I shoved my hands toward her face, shaking. He's here. He's in my space. I couldn't finish. The words would not form. She pulled me inside, wrapping me in blankets, pressing tea into my hands. Her eyes were wide, sharp with concern. "You need to leave," she said softly. "For real this time. Not just the job. The city, everything. Go somewhere he can't find you." I nodded numbly. I had no plan, no place. I only knew that my life, my mind, my very body had been violated in a way no legal order, no rational measure could fix. In the days that followed, I moved. Again. New apartment, new locks, new number. Every precaution I could take was implemented, and yet the invasion persisted. Notes appeared in my belongings, inside books, under pillows, folded inside jackets I had stored untouched for weeks. The eyes were no longer merely drawn. Sometimes they were accompanied by symbols, indecipherable marks that seemed to throb with intent. I began to notice subtle movements in my own reflection. when I brushed my hair, when I poured coffee. Sometimes my reflection lingered too long, shadows shifting against the motion. I checked cameras. Nothing. Only me, frantically moving, screaming silently into lenses that betrayed nothing. And then, the final violation. It happened one night as I tried to convince myself I was safe. I was folding laundry in my new apartment, the soft hum of the heater my only companion. I reached into my pocket for a pen I thought I had lost months ago. And there it was, a small object, delicate and familiar. A hairpin. The exact one I had lost years ago, with the tiny nick in the plastic I remembered perfectly. It wasn't in the drawer where I normally kept pins. It wasn't on the floor. It had simply appeared in my pocket, pressed against my thigh as though someone had slipped it there while I wasn't looking. I held it, trembling. The scent hit me first, cologne, sharp, familiar, terrifying. I could feel him there, not in the reflection, not in the shadows, not in any physical space I could measure, but in the very air around me, in the contours of my life, in my body itself. The hairpin was proof he could touch me without my awareness. He could invade me at will, crossing boundaries I had spent 2 years fortifying. I screamed. The sound tore through the apartment, bouncing off the walls like an echo of panic. A hollow affirmation that I was still alive, still human, but the scream changed nothing. No movement, no response, no presence other than the lingering perfume of someone who should not be there. I fled the apartment. I drove until the streets blurred, until I reached a motel on the outskirts of the city where no one knew me. I locked the doors, barricaded the windows, and sat in the corner of the room with trembling hands staring at the hairpin. I thought of calling the police. Thought of calling Rena. Thought of calling anyone. But I realized with sickening clarity that even laws, even friends, even new walls could not stop him. He existed beyond those measures, beyond the logic of space and distance. He was not merely a man. He was a presence, a shadow, a violation embedded in the very fabric of my life. And yet I could not leave entirely, could not surrender. There was still a sense of stubborn survival, a tiny ember that whispered, watch, wait, endure. I could exist in his shadow, but I would never be free from it. Every note, every hairpin, every faint reflection in glass or polished surface would remind me that he could reach me anywhere, at any time, without warning. Sleep became an abstract concept. Nights were measured not in hours, but in moments of safety and intrusion. I lived in half-light, in flickering fluorescent shadows and constant attention to every detail. My mind, once a sanctuary of rational thought and calm, had become a topography of paranoia. I could navigate the smallest spaces, track patterns, anticipate threats, and yet, somehow, he remained ahead of me. The last night I remember clearly. I was brushing my teeth and paused mid-motion. In the mirror, behind my own reflection, a shadow lingered. I blinked. It was gone. I reached for the hairpin in my pocket and felt it press like a secret, an assertion. I am still here. I do not know where Derek Halbrook is now. I do not know if he is watching from the streets of Syracuse or from the recesses of my memory. I only know that the hairpin, the eyes, the petal pressed into my palm last winter, they exist. And in their presence, so does he. Fear does not melt. Fear does not leave. Fear waits, buried in the cracks of walls, the folds of clothing, the reflections in glass, and it waits for you to notice it, to realize that the boundary you trusted is already gone. Sometimes, when I sit alone, I feel a brush of movement over my shoulder, and I know without opening my eyes that someone is there, not in shadow, not in reflection, in a way I cannot measure, cannot stop, and perhaps cannot survive. The end. I used to love the snow, not the way children love it, throwing snowballs, sculpting lopsided men with carrot noses, but the quiet it brought. Snow swallowed the town, muted the traffic, softened the hard edges of buildings. It was as if the world paused to breathe, a hush that made you believe nothing bad could happen beneath a blanket so pure. But that belief cracked the night I left Walgreens and stepped into the blizzard on Baker Street, when I realized snow doesn't just soothe. It swallows sound, yes, but it also swallows warning. It muffles footsteps, shouts, and the difference between what's out there and what's inside your head. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I left the automatic doors, their rubber seals groaning shut behind me, My breath rose like smoke, each exhale ripped away by the wind. The fluorescent Walgreens lot glowed faintly under its lamps, halos of yellow diffused by falling flakes. My co-workers had already left. Ms. Dobson, with her endless chatter about grandchildren, had patted my arm and told me to find a good man this year. If she only knew. I thought of him as I crossed the snow. Ryan Calder. Just his name pulled my stomach into knots. I'd broken things off 2 months ago after his suffocating devotion turned into obsession. He'd been all warmth at first. Constant check-ins, flowers, texts that made me blush. But warmth unchecked becomes heat, then fire. He wanted to know where I was every second, who I was with, why I didn't smile the way I used to. He clung so tightly that I couldn't breathe. When I ended it, he cried. Then he shouted. Then he swore he'd change. But I had seen the hunger in his eyes and I knew better. I thought leaving was enough. I thought space would cool him. But the gifts started arriving. Roses frozen solid inside jars of ice. My old house keys bent in half and shoved through the mail slot. Then the phone calls, always during blackouts when the power drained from half the city. The landline ringing in the dark, my cell buzzing when I lit a candle, and on the other end, nothing. Just breathing, familiar, slow, deliberate. When I told Alex, my best friend, she laughed. Girl, you need wine and sleep. You're jumpy as hell. But then she stayed over one night and saw it herself, the tire tracks at 2 a.m., circling the fresh snow around my building. She didn't laugh after that. Still, she told me Ryan couldn't be here. He was in counseling. 2 towns over, court-mandated, supervised. But that night in the Walgreens lot, every car was smothered in untouched snow except mine. My little red sedan's windshield was scraped clean, and faintly scrawled across the frost was a message. Still mine. I froze. My bag slipped from my shoulder, hitting the snow with a muffled thud. The storm muted everything, yet behind me came the crunch of boots. Steady, patient, I didn't turn. I bolted. The street blurred in a tunnel of white. My boots skidded, breath tearing in my chest, scarf slapping my face. Behind me, those steps. Not rushed, not frantic, just following. I stumbled into Rosie's Diner, its neon sign flickering pink against the storm. Heat hit me like a slap, thick with grease and burnt coffee. A waitress tried to hand me a mug but spilled half of it when she saw my hands trembling. I babbled about someone following me, pointing through the window to where the snow danced empty and still. The police searched. They found nothing. No figure, no prints. The windshield was clean. No words etched into frost, only my bag abandoned where I'd dropped it. Later, the officer told me Ryan had been in session that night. He couldn't have been there, but the truth lodged in my chest like glass. I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. And I remembered what I'd said the night I left him, when his begging turned to rage and my patience snapped. I wish you'd just disappear. Maybe he had. But not in the way I meant. I tried to laugh it off the next morning. Told myself I was overtired, the storm had played tricks on me. At Walgreens, I counted pills beneath humming lights, the rhythm of work lulling me. Ms. Dobson gossiped with customers. The day felt ordinary. But when I came home, ordinary shattered. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd blown out that morning. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off boots still caked in salt. My kettle whistled and I poured tea into my favorite mug, the chipped one with faded daisies. I lifted it, desperate for something warm. Inside, written faintly on the porcelain as if from a greasy fingertip, still mine. The mug hit the sink with a clatter, tea splattering across the counter. My heart hammered. I scrubbed the inside with scalding water, bubbles frothing until no trace remained. My rational brain screamed it wasn't there this morning. It wasn't. Unless it had been invisible until hot liquid made it bloom. Unless someone had been here. I tore through my apartment, flinging open closet doors, checking under the bed, yanking back the shower curtain. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and my pulse thudding in my ears. I tried to calm down, to rationalize. Maybe I'd written it myself in some dissociative haze. Maybe the word wasn't even there. Maybe it was a pattern in the glaze. I left the mug upside down in the sink and sat at the kitchen table, hugging myself until my chest stopped heaving. When Alex came over that night with a bottle of Merlot, I almost didn't tell her. But when she asked why I looked like I'd seen a ghost, the words tumbled out. She frowned. "Claire, you sure you didn't just imagine it?" I didn't. It was there. Inside the mug. Look, he's in counseling. He's being monitored. He couldn't have snuck in here to write in your dishes. So what, I'm just going crazy? She winced. I didn't say that. I'm just saying stress does weird things. You've been through hell with him. It's natural you're still on edge. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But when I went to bed later, the power hummed, then cut. My room sank into darkness. And in the glass of the window, I saw him. His face faint as if reflected from another world. He smiled. Slow. Deliberate. And though his lips didn't part, I swear he mouthed a word. Mine. I screamed. When I flicked on the flashlight, the window showed only my pale reflection. Eyes wild, hair plastered with sweat. No one there, nothing. I tried to fight it. To prove myself wrong. I checked the vents when I heard humming, climbed on a chair and held my hand against the grate. No sound, no vibration. I bought a small motion camera online, one meant for nurseries, and aimed it at my kitchen overnight. The next morning I scrolled through hours of footage, nothing. Just me stumbling in for water, hair tangled, eyes hollow. No intruder. No writing, only me. Always only me. But when I opened my diary, one I hadn't touched in weeks, tucked between pages was a slip of paper. My handwriting, my pen, but words I hadn't written. Still mine. The page blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pressed the paper to my chest, gasping. Had I written it? In my sleep? Was this all me? Or was it him, closer than I wanted to believe, slipping into the places that should have been safe? Sleep became impossible. At Walgreens, I fumbled pills, dropped bottles. Ms. Dobson pulled me aside and said I looked ghostly. I laughed too loud. Customers eyed me like I might collapse. Nights were worse. The power would flicker, and in that hush I'd feel him there, smiling through the window, lips shaping words I couldn't hear. Sometimes I thought I felt a breath against my ear when I turned off the light. Once I woke with my hair spread across the pillow in the shape of a hand. I told myself it wasn't real. It couldn't be. But doubt coiled tighter every day. And then came the flower. A single red petal on my pillow one morning, soft against my cheek. A rose, the kind he used to bring, frozen solid in jars. I hadn't bought flowers in months. My window had been locked. My door bolted. Yet it was there, resting where I slept, as if placed with care. My scream split the morning. Neighbors banged the wall. I clutched the petal until it crumbled in my fist. That was when I stopped pretending I was safe. Sleep no longer belonged to me. Night stretched into raw, trembling hours where I clutched my blanket and stared at the door, waiting for the handle to turn. I told myself it was paranoia, exhaustion, trauma echoing through my body. But then I'd find the proof. Little things that should not have been there. A note folded neatly inside my coat pocket when I hadn't worn it in days. My handwriting again, slanted and familiar, but the same two words, still mine. My lip balm lid unscrewed and resting on the counter when I knew I hadn't touched it. The radio switching on at 3 a.m. Static whispering like a voice almost forming words. The camera I set in my bedroom captured nothing but my own restless thrashing, except once. For 3 frames, less than a second, the screen flickered and his face appeared. Not moving, not breathing, just staring, eyes locked onto me while I slept, then gone. I threw the camera away. Alex tried to pull me back to earth. She dragged me to brunch on a Sunday, hoping pancakes could ground me. The clatter of silverware and the hiss of espresso machines should have felt normal. But when I lifted the sugar jar to stir my coffee, I froze. Inside, pressed against the glass, was another slip of paper. The words written in black ink, almost playful in their loops. Still mine. I shoved it down and tried to smile across the table. Alex tilted her head. Claire, you're scaring me. You're not sleeping, you're jumping at shadows, I think. I think you need help. It's him, I whispered. You don't see it, but it's him. Her fork clinked onto the plate. He's in counseling. He's under supervision. Then explain this. I slammed the sugar jar down. She peered inside. Empty. No slip of paper. Nothing. She looked at me with something worse than doubt. Pity. I stormed out, leaving the smell of coffee and syrup behind. The blizzard returned that week. Snow thickened against the windows of my apartment, muting the outside world. The power hummed and faltered, lights flickering. In the dark glass of my bedroom window, I saw him again. His reflection smiled. This time, his lips moved clearly. They formed a word I couldn't deny. Mine. I lunged at the glass, palm slamming cold against it. My reflection distorted. His face vanished. But when I stepped back, breath fogging the pain, I saw it clearly scratched into the frost. Still mine. I tore the curtains down, stuffed them into the closet, tried to pretend windows didn't exist, but shadows lengthened regardless. Sleep pulled me under one night, heavy and merciless. I dreamed of snow swallowing my apartment, filling it knee-high, chest-high until I couldn't breathe. In the dream, Ryan stood outside the glass, watching as I pounded my fists against it. His smile never broke. He lifted a single rose, pressed it to the pane, and when the petals bled through the frost, they fell onto my bed. I woke with a scream lodged in my throat and a real petal clinging damply to my cheek. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I scrubbed my skin raw as if contact had stained me. The petal lay limp in the sink, crimson against porcelain, too vivid to be imagined. That was when I knew he wasn't just watching anymore. He could touch me. I barricaded the door with a chair, shoved furniture against the windows. I called Alex in tears.
He's here.
He's in here. Claire, listen to yourself. You need to see someone. The line cut out. Static filled my ear, low and rhythmic like breathing. My hands shook as I dropped the phone. The power went out. Darkness collapsed over me, and in the pitch black I heard the crunch of boots on my carpet, impossibly close. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Only the smell of roses, faint and frozen, reached me. When the lights buzzed back, the room was empty. The barricade untouched. My phone dead. But in my pocket, where I'd stuffed tissues hours earlier, my fingers closed around something else. Smooth. Fragile. I pulled it free. A hair clip. Gold. Delicate one I'd lost years ago when Ryan and I were still together. I hadn't seen it since our second date, when it slipped from my hair on his passenger seat. I'd forgotten it existed, but here it was, resting in my palm as if he'd just tucked it there, claiming me again with something I couldn't deny. The snow outside pressed against the glass, sealing me in silence. My hands shook around the clip, its edges biting into my skin. For the first time I understood this wasn't obsession anymore. It wasn't love warped into madness. It wasn't even memory. It was something deeper, impossible, unstoppable. Ryan had found a way to exist just outside reality. And now he'd found a way inside. I don't lock the doors anymore. I know it doesn't matter. The snow will fall, the power will die, and when it does, he'll be there, smiling faintly, waiting for me to remember, and I always do.